Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Second Climate Change and Sustainability, hosted by UBIC Webinars. My name is Vladka and I will be the moderator today. The aim of this webinar is to raise environmental awareness and to share inspiring ideas on how to save our planet. We need to collaborate globally, and mainly we need to act now. So I'm very thankful that thousands of you have registered for today's webinar, and that we have today people from every corner of our Mother Earth. We will today focus on topics such as reforestation, plastic pollution and plastic waste, carbon capture, and reusing the food waste. Before introducing the agenda and our speakers, I would like to offer you, dear participants, a possible cooperation with UBIC Webinars. Does your company want to make new business partnerships or find new clients? Please do not hesitate and contact us on operations@UBIC Webinars, and we can create an exciting webinar together. Great. Let's go now over the agenda and housekeeping rules. In the meantime, please answer questions in the poll, which I will launch at this point. So we will know more about our audience today. Just a detail, these polls are visible only for our Zoom participants. We have 5 speakers today, and the webinar will open Mr. Stéphane Hallaire, who is president at Reforest'Action. And he will speak about reforesting the world. After that, we will continue with a speech by Henrik Beha Pedersen from Plastic Change, who will show us the way to a plastic pollution-free world. The third speaker, Vidya Amarnath from Paterson Energy, will speak about a startup that converts plastic waste into a high-grade diesel for industrial use. And the plastic pollution topic will close Mr. Richard Hardiman from Ranmarine, who is saving the oceans using robots in water to collect the plastic waste. Last presentation by Stephen Horrey from Waste to Environmental System is focused on repurposing the food waste. I hope you will be able to stay with us until the end, as we will have a short time for additional questions and answers from the audience and our speakers after all those presentations. When it comes to housekeeping rules, if you have any question during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. The speaker will answer them after the presentation. Use the chat only for comments. When it comes to our YouTube participants, you can write your questions to the live chat. If you want to speak about us on social media, please do not forget to use the hashtag #UBICWebinars. Now we can go through the results of our short survey. So we can see for our YouTube participants, the first question was, which continent do you live in? So we can see that the 45% of our participants are from Europe, then from Asia, Africa, North America, and also we have participants from South America. And when it comes to the topic, which topic is the most of your interest, yes, we can see that you would like to know more about all the topics such as renewable energy, plastic pollution, global warming, sustainable business. So I hope this webinar will be interesting for you and you will find some answers for the questions. Great. So now it's time to introduce our first speaker, Stéphane Hallaire. Stéphane created Reforest'Action in 2010 with the ambition of providing companies and individuals with a concrete, positive and measurable solution in the service of the planet, participatory reforestation. As an environmental leader, Stéphane Hallaire carries a simple message. Forests are the best solution to meet the 2 major challenges of the future of humanity: climate change and the erosion of biodiversity. With this in mind, Reforest'Action now allows more than 2,000 companies and 200,000 individuals to plant and protect forests with their stakeholders and relatives. Stéphane, thank you very much for being with us today, and we are looking forward to your presentation. You can start to share your screen now.
Thank you, Vladka. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
All right, thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you, Ubique Webinars, for the invitation. So I'm Stéphane Hallaire. I'm the founder and the CEO of Reforest'Action. Reforest'Action is a reforestation company. Our mission is to protect, restore, and create forests around the world for a number of reasons. And I would like to organize this presentation with a short presentation of Reforest'Action, of the forest's superpowers, as I often call them, the challenges, and what needs to be done regarding forest, climate, and biodiversity. And then I will focus on our approach to reforestation, so we can address the forest challenges. We have planted, protected, restored a bit more than 15 million trees in 30 countries with a number of partners, more than 100 partners. We are on every continent, and although we are based in Paris, France, we have projects in North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia. We focus on forests for a number of reasons. Maybe the first one, the one that everybody has in mind, is that forests are huge, probably the biggest land-based carbon sink in the world. And it's a carbon sink on which we can act. We can destroy, or we can restore or create this carbon sink. So when people talk about forest and forest restoration especially, in most cases, they want to do that to offset their carbon emissions. But forests are a lot more than a carbon sink. They're also home of 80% of terrestrial biodiversity on Earth. So this is the beauty of forest. When you restore a forest, when you create a forest or protect a forest, then you can act on climate, but also on biodiversity. And you know that these two challenges, climate change and biodiversity erosion, are the two biggest challenges we have to face regarding environment. Moreover, forests are a lot more than a way to tackle climate and biodiversity challenges. They deliver what we call ecosystemic services. They create jobs, they provide energy, they provide food, they filter water, they retain the soil, they are good for our health and for our well-being. And I will detail how we approach forests, but it's very important to keep in mind that every time we address forest with all these ecosystemic services in mind. We want to improve their impact on climate, on biodiversity, but also on social impact as well, improving people's living conditions wherever we act. It's especially important in the tropical regions where you have more than 2 billion people depending on forest on a day-to-day basis for their basic needs. So if you address reforestation from the social needs, then you've got a good chance that your project will last. If you address it only for climate or for biodiversity, there is little chance that your forest will last and your trees will be cut potentially in the future because they don't have any positive social impact. So this is why we at Reforest'Action, we put a strong focus on the social impact of reforestation. The two biggest challenges that forests have to face are deforestation and degradation. In tropical regions, deforestation is still very, very strong. There are 10 million hectares disappearing every single year. So the reason of this deforestation is very different depending on where you are. If you're in the Amazonian forest, agriculture is a key reason. If you're in Central Africa, in the Congo Basin, then it's more illegal logging. And if you are in Indonesia or Malaysia, where you've got in these three regions, you've got the most native forest and equatorial forest. Well, in Indonesia and Malaysia, deforestation is due to palm oil to a great extent. So this is the biggest threat we have on tropical forest, deforestation. In temperate forests, like in Europe or in the US, for instance, there is very little deforestation because we lack primary forests. But forests are degraded because of climate change. They are impacted by storms, they're impacted by diseases, by wildfires, and so by lack of water, and so on and so on. So although we don't cut trees, the trees die because of climate change. So in the tropical regions, we need to fight against deforestation, and we can do that through a number of ways, including reforestation, planting trees or protecting trees. But in the temperate forest, we can act and restore forest by planting or protecting trees that are adapted to the new climate and the climate for the following decades, not the previous decades. So the challenges are big. The services provided by the forest are big. So we need to act big. As you may know, we are entering the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. It starts this year, in June this year, and it will end in 2030. And what this is it's a decade that will help us meeting the Paris Agreement target, which is a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature by 2050. What the IPCC says is that to reach this target, we need to reduce dramatically our CO2 emissions. It's a starting point. Without doing this, no way we can meet this target. We need to protect existing forest because they store 30% of our CO2 emissions. But also now we need to restore forest and to create new forests. And the IPCC says that we need to create 1 billion hectares of new forests, which is approximately the size of the US.
I'm asking.
Which is 5% of the total land on Earth. So in other words, we are starting redesigning 5% of the global land. This is my job. I'm part of this movement. Reforest'Action is not at all the only reforestation organization. Thanks God for that. But it's a huge challenge we have to face. But it's feasible. It's feasible for two reasons. The first reason is it's 1 billion hectares. It's not an infinite number. It's a finite number. And the second reason is that there is room for these additional forests. And on the graph, on the left-hand side, on the top, you've got the representation of where forests can be put, all the land that can welcome forests. And you can see that there is a lot of room, especially in Russia, in Canada, in the US, in Brazil, in Africa, and in Australia, and in China as well, and in India. So this is where we can have forest. At the bottom, this is where we can add forest, because in the previous figure, minus the existing forest, the land occupied by cities or agriculture, because we don't want to compete with agriculture and cities. So this is the extra room for forest according to the IPCC. So this is the challenge we have to face. Now, how can we redesign 5% of the planet and create new forest without damaging the world even more? Our approach at Reforest'Action is to build a generation of reforestation entrepreneurs. What that means is we are an organization linked with a number of private funds and project holders. The private funds are companies and individuals, people like you and I, who want to contribute to forest restoration and creation. On the right-hand side, you've got project holders, what I call the reforestation entrepreneurs, people who live nearby forest or within forest and want to restore this forest, but with a number of principles that I will detail on the next slide. Our job at Reforest'Action is to link the two together and providing technical support, financial support, and to monitor these reforestation projects on the long run. So far, we were created in 2010. We've supported more than 800 projects in 30 countries and funded only 15 million trees, which is already a big number, but it's far from enough, as you can imagine. So we've got 4 principles for the reforestation projects. The first principle is to have a diversity of forest tree species. If we want to restore biodiversity, it has to start with a diversity of tree species. The second principle is to have a joint approach with the local stakeholders, as you can imagine. The reforestation entrepreneurs, the people who will run the project on site, but also their stakeholders, the local communities, the local governments, the minorities, women, men, and so on and so on. The third principle is to maintain biodiversity, as I already explained, and we need to measure the existing biodiversity and to make sure that it's maintained or increased. And the fourth principle is to monitor the project, because if we want to scale reforestation to 1 billion hectares, we need to learn from our successes and our mistakes. So with the long-term monitoring, we can collect a huge amount of data and we can compare existing projects with future projects and share best practices. The way we work is through a collaborative approach with the generation of reforestation entrepreneurs. At Reforest'Action, we select a project according to a set of criteria. We provide our technical expertise to these reforestation entrepreneurs because they don't necessarily have all the skills how to run a project and how to run this project with the local stakeholders. We fund the project from the private funds that we collect from companies and individuals. And the individuals can participate on our website, reforestaction.com, if you wish to participate. And the local partner, i.e. the reforestation entrepreneurs, they plant or protect or restore the trees or the forest, and they monitor the project. So make sure that the trees, they grow, they deliver the benefits that are expected by the stakeholders. But in addition, we do monitor the ecosystemic services that are provided by the project. So we have a scorecard for every project when we can gather data from the land and from satellite data as well coming up. And we can compare information and we can provide return on experience to the local stakeholders and to the entrepreneurs. And we value the outputs of these projects to promote this model to new entrepreneurs. As an example, we've got a project in Peru, in the San Martin department region. It's in the Amazonia forest, where we plant a number of trees in degraded forest. And we've been doing that for a number of years now with a local NGO called URCU. We provide technical expertise so they can create tree nurseries train local farmers how to plant trees and how to protect and maintain these trees so they can grow and deliver benefits. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we make sure that there is social impact for the local community. In this example, we plant, among other tree species, Maya nut trees. These trees provide nuts and that are very relevant for a very food that will improve well-being and health for the local population. So here on the picture, you can see people learning how to cook the Maya nuts. This is exactly the type of project we're running. From what I can tell, the reforestation projects that are run by local entrepreneurs with a social impact in mind, and climate and biodiversity, is a good path to a bioeconomy, an economy based on the living species, not on petroleum. So you increase the living conditions, you create a positive economy while restoring the environment. And the more you create wellness, the more you restore the environment. So this is our approach to reforestation. This is our way to reshape, redesign 5% of land on Earth. Of course, we are not the only organization. Other people do other things with different approaches, which is really good because we need a diverse approach. Our approach is very much based on local knowledge and sharing return on experience. This is, in few words, how we approach reforestation. What I can do is probably answer a few questions because I think, let's get that I've got 5 minutes left, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, sure. We have some questions from the audience. So thank you very much, Stéphane, for a very inspiring presentation about Reforest'Action. Now we can go through the questions. So, for example, Shaugi is asking, can I know if you work with the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, RSPO, to combat deforestation?
Sorry, I was going through the questions that are on the Q&A, but
yes, I'm also reading to know what you will be answering. So what are your thoughts on the current sustainable certification schemes for palm oil companies?
Yeah, there are a number of labels that that have a specific goal, which is to reduce deforestation. RSPO is one of them on palm oil. You've got FSC, you've got PEFC on logging. I think they're necessary. I think they're not perfect. I think they're not sufficient, but thankfully they exist. And what we need to do is to make sure that they improve and make sure that deforestation comes to an end. At the moment, they are not sufficient. I'm pretty sure they do their best, but they need to do even more because we still have 10 million hectares of deforestation every single year. So we need to stop illegal logging and we need to rely on improving labels to stop these deforestation. I'm sorry, it's not a yes or no answer to a very difficult question, but it's a very pragmatic approach.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your answer. There's another question from Annika. Hi, thanks for a very interesting talk. How do you see the growing concern for trees being affected by more diseases? And how do you think we should tackle this problem? As a lot of trees have to be cut down each year to prevent these diseases from spreading.
Yes, as I mentioned, there are a number of threats against forests and due to climate change especially, and diseases are one of them. It's the biggest we have to face in Europe. Trees are disappearing from Europe, and we have, unfortunately, to cut these trees to replace them by another tree, other tree species, so the disease doesn't spread to the next forest and to the next tree. So this is a big action that we need to run, and we are running already in a number of European forests, and it's true as well in the US and other part of the world, where we cut sick trees to replace with other tree species. We can talk about diseases, but we can talk about a lack of water as well, when you have some tree species that need a lot of water to grow. And because of climate change, they lack water, and therefore they die slowly. So we need to replace them by other tree species that need less water to grow.
Okay, thank you for explanation. Another question from Rena. Dear Stéphane, what is the reason of forest fires? Human factor or global warming?
Mainly human factor, to a large extent. It's true almost everywhere. In Amazonia, where wildfires are just a nightmare, they are due to human beings who want to deforest. Well, people need to live, right? They need food, they need incomes, and in some case, they lack land to grow whatever they need to eat and to have income. So they cut the trees on a native forest, they burn the land, and they put some cattle, or they grow vegetables. They can be small farmers, they can be large companies. The wildfires can be controlled or not controlled, and they can spread through hectares of forest. I think we had an 80% increase of wildfires last year in Amazonia compared to the year before. It's something that has to stop, and one way to stop this is to reduce the need of more land for people to live or to expand. So one approach for the local farmers is to develop agroforestry, where we plant trees on existing agricultural land, on existing croplands, so people can have more income from 1 hectare, so they don't have to expand to another hectare to increase their income. For bigger companies, farming companies or agricultural firms, we need to reduce our consumption of palm oil, soy, and red meat, especially because they are very demanding on land. So it's our responsibility collectively to reduce the pressure on forest because we create the conditions for deforestation and wildfires.
Okay, Kerima is asking, hi Stéphane, for reforestation in countries, do you need any agreement of country? Are there any boundaries for the process?
Well, we need the agreement from the landowner, especially. So the first challenge is to make sure that the land is owned by an individual or an organization or a state, and it's well managed, and the trees will not be cut in a couple of years because the landowner decided so. That's the first challenge. In most countries, we don't need a government approval, although we always make sure that the government is comfortable with our approach and our project. So it doesn't come a few years after challenging the project. We do have projects on state-owned land, on public land. So this is a situation where we are in direct access to the government, and we have a very direct approval from them to restore the land.
There are many questions actually for you. So there is another interesting question from Rena. If we switch from plastic to paper, it will also lead to deforestation?
That's a very good point. Bioeconomy is an economy based on trees and other living beings, and not petrol. So we all want to move from plastic to paper, for instance, but this will put even more pressure on forest, and the paper industry is already one source of deforestation, because we don't have enough land that is managed under some labels and prevent from deforestation. If we put more pressure, there will be more deforestation, and that's not what we want. So the first thing to do is to reduce consumption. Whatever we do, plastic or paper, let's reduce. The third thing is we need to create new forests. As I mentioned, there is a plan to add 1 billion hectares of new forest, and we don't want single species forest. We don't want 1 billion hectares of eucalyptus only, because it will be damaging for climate and for biodiversity and for local economy and for the soil and for everything, really. So we want diverse forests that can deliver economic impact, but also climate and biodiversity and social impact. So we need more forest for the industry, like paper, but still keeping in mind that the biodiversity and the climate still need to be considered. So first, it's always the same story, let's reduce and then restore, or in parallel, restore.
Another interesting question from Nicholas. Doesn't the CO2 released from dying trees recirculated back into the atmosphere, making forests only a temporary solution?
Yes and no, because yes, they are a non-permanent sink, because you burn a tree, the CO2 is released in the atmosphere, but part of the CO2 is stored in the soil, not in the tree. And if you cut the tree to use the wood for long-term use, like buildings, for instance, well, the CO2 will remain in the wood, even though the tree was cut. But if you for the paper industry, basically, if you grow forest for paper industry, yes, only, yes, the CO2 will be released in the atmosphere, because paper is a very short-term use of trees. So at some point it will be recycled and then burned.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have still some 2-3 minutes for questions. Nadia is asking, how does the rate of reforestation compare with the rate of deforestation? If deforestation continues at the current rate, how will this affect the reforestation efforts to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius?
It's a very good one, actually. We lose 10 million hectares of forest every single year, especially in the tropical regions. Primary forest. There are 5 million hectares of new forest every year due to reforestation, especially in the temperate regions. So we lose in the tropicals, we gain in the temperate regions. The issue is we lose more than we create, and we lose primary forest, very old forest, very rich in terms of biodiversity and very efficient in terms of climate, with forests that have less biodiversity and maybe less efficient on climate. It depends. So we don't act enough on land restoration and forest creation, that's for sure. And this is why the UN, the United Nations, launches the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. But there is no way we can reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius target with this rate of deforestation, because if you just do the math, we lose 5 million hectares every single year. And forests have a huge contribution on carbon storage from the atmosphere, 30%. So the first focus is stop deforestation, restore land, create new forests.
There is a question from Oben. Do you have any partner in Cameroon? And also, are the approaches towards reforestation the same for all continents, given our diversity in landscape?
I don't think I have an existing partner in Cameroon. If you have opportunities, please contact us. You've got the website on the slide. We will consider the project very carefully. And yes and no, we don't have the same approach for every single project, because every single forest is specific. They are all different. So we cannot have exactly the same approach for the forest. And actually we have a specific approach for each of them. But we always follow the same 4 principles that I detailed earlier. The approach is, we want projects that will have a positive impact on climate, have a positive impact on biodiversity, and have a positive impact on local populations. But the impact on local populations is decided by the local populations. So they tell us what benefits they want to have for them and for their stakeholders. So they design their project. We help them in doing so, and we monitor. So we have the same 4 principles, but it's their project with their specificities, and the people who will design the project are the people living in their forest or nearby. It's very important. So we don't tell them, this is our viewpoint, this is what you need to do, because we're in Paris, we're not in in Cameroon or wherever, and they know better.
Okay, we have many questions. So also during the webinar, if it will be possible for you, Stéphane, please answer those questions, as I know that you won't be able to stay with us for the short discussion at the end. There is the last question now. In terms of reforestation, how you decide which species of trees to plant? What are the approaches to prevent monodominance indeed?
We decide the tree species with the local project holder, depending on the soil, on the climate, and on the endemic species. So we prefer endemic species. We also choose from more scientific viewpoint, especially regarding climate change. We want trees that will support, that will grow with the new climate coming up. So it's a matter of balance between local species, but adapted to the new climate. We reject every species that will be invasive, because they are a huge risk to local biodiversity. So even though they can be adapted to the new climate, we reject these tree species because they are too dangerous for the local biodiversity. So it's a compromise between local species, climate change, and the scientific knowledge we can collect from the different projects we run.
Okay, thank you very much, Stéphane, for all your answers. We have to move on to the next speaker. So please, dear participants, you can contact Stéphane directly to his email or phone if you would like to partner with the Reforest'Action or to perhaps ask some additional questions. Thank you very much again, Stéphane.
Thank you very much, everybody, and I'll try to answer some questions during the next few minutes directly on the Q&A.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So now it's the time to move to the second speaker. The second speaker is Henrik Beha Pedersen. He is founder of the Danish-based, globally oriented non-profit NGO Plastic Change. Henrik has taken on the challenge to be a part of the solution to the growing problem regarding marine litter. Plastic Change is a part of the steering group at Break Free from Plastic, a global movement of more than 2,000 organizations. Henrik was leading also the expedition Plastic Change between 2014 and 2016 from Denmark to Hawaii Islands. On board were universities carrying out frontier science. Also, documentaries were sailing with the expedition to create global media exposure on the massive pollution from marine litter. Another goal of the expedition was to produce learning materials based on the expedition. Plastic Change work with partners like UN, Observatory Status, the EU-based Rethink Plastic Alliance, and also run innovation workshops with industrial partners. Henrik has also a permanent blog in the Danish engineer online magazine, The Engineer. Thank you very much, Henrik, for being with us today. We are looking forward to your presentation now, so please, you can start to share your screen and your presentation.
Thanks a lot, Vladka. I hope you hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can hear you very well. Also see your presentation.
Oh, that's fantastic. And thanks for the very nice introduction. And Stéphane, very interesting about the forest and forestation, deforestation. And I think we are sharing some of the issues, but let's get to that. Thanks, everyone. I hope you are ready for a tour around plastic and why I believe that we can make plastic and plastic pollution and the issue of plastic pollution a tool for us in the future. The very symbolic plastic pollution that is reflecting our way of living. So I want to go through with you how we established and why we established Plastic Change and the expedition plastic. And turn also pretty quickly to some of the very exciting solutions that I see in the future regarding plastic. We all love plastic, so what's the problem? I wear contact lenses. There is plastic all over in the society, and it definitely carries a lot of features for us all. But the problem also is that it takes a very long time before it's gone again. It's a very stable material, and only sunlight, UV light, and forces from waves, etc., can break down plastic again. So we need to be very careful how we use plastic in the future, and we need change in the future to shift away from our single-use culture in the future. I'll get back to that in the next 15 minutes. When I started Plastic Change, I'm an environmental biologist, and I work with environmental issues, also deforestation, climate issues for many years in different environmental organizations. But I also sailed a lot through my whole life, and I've been diving a lot, and I saw the growing amount of plastic, and I heard about these plastic islands north of Bermuda, north of Hawaii, and I decided that if we wanted to make this a huge theme, a huge issue, why not go there? Why not work with pictures, work with storytelling, and go there ourselves? So we started up Expedition Plastic, going from Denmark to the Mediterranean Ocean and crossing the Atlantic to visit Bermuda and the plastic soup north of Bermuda. And also we went to Hawaii Islands to visit the plastic soup out there. And what we basically did was to document and to tell stories and bring documentarists and scientists on the ship. And we had trawls in water every day to measure plastic pollution in the world's oceans. And only 2 days on that trip from Denmark to Hawaii, we didn't catch any microplastic. So that was quite a conclusion for us, that we, human beings, we have been able to pollute, in general, the world's oceans with microplastic. So we have introduced plastic to nature as a biological and a toxic factor for the coming generations. So me, as a father, as an environmental biologist, I have asked myself, how can I, with what I do, my work, in the best way, change this in the future? And we learned so much on this expedition. We learned that we will never be able to clean it up. The plastic is all over. It's in the water column. It's mainly on the bottom of the seafloor at thousands of meters of depth. So we can never control it. It's lost when it's out of our hands, when it's lost in nature or in the oceans. It's a lost case. Never believe them. Someone tells you that we will solve this problem by cleaning up. We will clean up, we do clean up, but it will never be the solution, because the amount of plastic that we are littering in the world's oceans is doubling and then doubling again in the coming years. So we took that conclusion with us on land. We decided after 3 years of sailing and work on the world's oceans that we need to work on land. We need to look at our consumption patterns, our overconsumption, and be able to reduce our littering and use of plastic and energy in the future. This is a picture from Hawaii. I just give you a short introduction to what we saw on this expedition. I mean, this pattern of microplastic all over the beaches on Camilo Beach. This is on Hawaii. And I just had to draw my sieve two times through the water. I thought it was foam on the top of the water that I saw when I was picking up different litter items on the beach. And I went to the water and I could see it's not foam. It's waves of microplastic coming into these beautiful Hawaiian islands. And this experience and these pictures and this whole thing, this tour, really animated me and has been motivating me regarding finding solutions. This is a 5-minute walk at another Pacific island to collect various products that we all know and that we can all relate to. Typically products that have been used a few times, a few seconds maybe, and then they have been thrown somewhere and end up in the world's waters. Many people in Denmark say, well, this is a specific Asian problem. This is not European or Denmark. I'm from Denmark, and I went to the west coast of Denmark, and this is the west coast of Denmark. So it's not Asia. It's not necessarily another country. It's also Denmark. It's also Western countries and our coastlines that are now hit by the massive plastic pollution. And it's also in the lakes in the center of Copenhagen. I grew up and I watched the swan, how it's building its nest every year. And I've been watching how the amount of single-use plastic has been a growing part. And we can never clean it up. We will never be able to create cleanup systems, or we are so many billion people on this earth. So we need new thinking, radical thinking. How can we change the way we use the material in the future? We see all the effects on the animals. We see them on the birds. We see them on the seabirds, like you see on Midway Islands, you have the albatrosses and the small chicks, they can't get away from, I mean, on their first flight, they can't get up in the air because they're heavy because of plastic in their stomach, and they can't throw it up. But it's not only Midway in Hawaii, it's also in the North Sea. And we all see now and have understood now the impact on marine mammals. So the issue is high on the agenda. It's become even a voter issue, at least in my part of the world. And the forecast is this: we've been doubling and doubling at the amount of plastic that we are using and littering. Right now, it's one load of plastic, truckload of plastic every minute, and it's going to be 4 truckloads of plastic every minute in 2050 if we continue. And it's primarily all the different materials, the goods that are sent around. It's all the packaging that we are focusing on as plastic change, but the sources for plastic pollution are not only packaging, they are also, I mean, or it could be agriculture or building and construction. So we need to work on this on various sectors. But keep in mind that the main users and I mean, Denmark used its budget of resources 3 days ago. If you look at the world's consumption of resources, the whole world is going to, in average, be using its resources in 3 or 4 months. But we, as a Western and rich country, have been using our resources already 3 days ago. And here you see how much waste we generate. So our conclusion has been that we must go on land we must change the way that we are consuming plastic and single-use materials in the future. We must close the tap. And how do we do that? How do we do that in the right way? In the future, we need to have a lot more focus on how do we reduce, how do we reuse, and then how do we recycle. So recycling, which is currently very much on the top of the political agenda, should be less on everyone's screen. It should be reused, because there you also have all the energy issues. So because you use much less energy if you reuse products than if you recycle them. It's a heavy process to recycle products. And the EU has acknowledged that in its single-use plastic directive, where you are reducing some specific consumption of products. For example, the straw or the single-use cup, or, one example is the cup. Maybe you can see here, we have the traditional thin cup, which is now more and more in cities replaced by a hard plastic cup that can be washed up and reused. We have it in Tivoli in Copenhagen. We also have the festival cup here made by Tuborg and Carlsberg that is replacing 2 million of single-use plastic cups in every year on the Danish festivals. So we see some good steps towards reuse and rethinking plastic in the future. And we need to see it on a much bigger scale. We need to see, and it's spurring for our youngsters. They see that all the green business models that are lying within the upcoming circular economy, it will spur, it will be for the young ones, for the new generations, it will be so interesting for them to capture the green models where you can actually create a more circular model, for example, around all the cups that we are using for drinking coffee. So in the future, we will have to look at our behavior, our single-use behavior. We need to a revolution regarding the look, whether it's wood or it's plastic. It's not really the question. It's how we build systems behind products that they can be reused and then recycled in the future. That's so exciting to me. And we also need to look at also the financial logins, because in our linear economy, we have created a certain need also when we are burning plastic and making heat out of it. There is a need for plastic and single-use items out there on the market. So we need to create new systems and unlock these financial logins in the future. And look much more deep into the different advantages at reuse. For example, the Danish system around bottles, that there is a deposit on a bottle and it's designed for the system. It's a shared design even, and customized, and it's brought back and it's used again. It should then be refilled and not crushed and built up again. And that's going to be interesting if we can succeed with that in the future. So a few principles that we need on the global market, and that MacArthur is working with some of the global brands around right now, is that we need ambitious goals. And some of the multinationals, the biggest ones, are setting ambitious goals and more realizing that reuse, not recycling, is going to be the solution in the future. And not only do we need ambitious goals, but we also need these companies to be transparent. And slowly, some of the companies, they are showing their figures around how much resources are they using. And then we need to work with the companies and the politicians around the principles of sustainability, and how we create these new value chains, which are really sustainable and not a continuation of the single-use economy. So inspiration and knowledge sharing is on top of people's minds right now, because there's so much new going on. There's so many new business models entering right now. And it's models that are here to reduce how much resources we use in the future. It's reduction of light plastic bags. It's Carlsberg looking for how can we not use plastic around a six-pack, but maybe a bit of glue. It's refill systems that are reducing our use of and it's reuse models that we've seen more and more also on festivals, but also, for example, this you have this bag for when you're weighing your vegetables in the supermarket. You can use this bag again and again in some supermarkets. And here you also have some other examples of reuse models. The beer bottle that you can fill up again, or that everyone can bring their own water bottle and fill it up again in the streets. That's something that EU wants to promote in the future, that everyone should be able to get some water wherever they are in public space and fill up their water bottle, and by that reduce how many bottles we are buying. Right now, we are buying 1 million of bottles every minute, so we should reduce that in the future. And then after reusing products, of course, they must be designed for recycling. And a small example is that Coca-Cola at the moment, they have found out that the small plastic ring on the top of their bottle wasn't really necessary, so they could reduce their use of plastic on every bottle. And it's a small step, but it means a lot when it's this amount of bottles sold everywhere in the world. So designing for recyclability is also going to be important in the future. Yeah. The container business, they have been able to standardize and to find out how to transport all our goods in a simple, smart, standardized way. And I believe the same is going to happen for packaging in the future. And it all taps into the agenda at the moment regarding the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially responsible consumption and production, Goal 12, and life below water. And as we finish this, I just want to shortly say that we are pleased to be part of Break Free from Plastic and be a part of the steering group, one of the 12 organizations that are part of the steering group in this global movement, and happy to share all our knowledge and our experience from the last years of work regarding plastic pollution with anyone. We see ourselves as a part of a movement that will keep up the pressure, that will spur innovative business models in the future, and keep the pressure on the politicians so that the issue of plastic pollution will not disappear, but it's something that we're going to find solutions to in the future. So with those words, I will finish, and Vladka, I'm sure that you can control what questions we should answer.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for a very interesting presentation. And yes, we have many questions from the audience, so we can start. And for example, interesting question from Harriet: how did all the plastics enter the ocean in the first place?
Yes. It enters the ocean via a range of systems. Actually, it's in many parts of the world. People, they don't know about that. That the products that they buy, that the material around them, it doesn't break down. I mean, a simple thing like information that you shouldn't, for example, dig a hole and bury all the waste that you're producing. Or that you shouldn't burn it on open land. I mean, simple information like that is in many countries, it hasn't been available. When we started Plastic Change 7 years ago, no one knew the word microplastic in Denmark. And today all kids, they know about microplastic and how microplastic is working its way up through the food chain. So knowledge sharing and also a demand that the companies, it should be a demand and something natural for all companies to tell about how to store, how to take care of all what is wrapped around the product that is being bought by you in the future.
Okay, thank you for your answer. There is a discussion about the fishing industry. So what do you think about it, as they are saying that a huge percentage of this plastic is coming from the overfishing industry? So what is your opinion on this?
Well, definitely. I mean, the fishing industry has to change, like we all have to change in the future. Up to 20% of all the plastic pollution comes from the fishing industry. Especially the ghost nets floating around and they keep fishing and let's get back to the thinking around building a system around a product. We have in Iceland, for example, you have a deposit, you have an award if you bring back your trawl, and that whole thinking that we need to put an incentive, a deposit, an award on any product, and so that it's getting circulated, whether it's possible to clean it up and use it again, or it's going directly for recycling, being broken down and built up again. We need to create systems and reestablish how we think about products, especially single-use products in the future.
There is a question from Harriet again. What percentage of marine life is being killed by microplastics? If you know this number, I'm not sure, but maybe you can.
Sorry, is the question how many?
What percentage of marine life is being killed by microplastics and plastics?
Well, the UN is estimating that at least 100,000 mammals are getting killed by microplastic every year. And we certainly don't know about, I mean, the whole on the scientific area, if you talk to the scientists working with microplastics, at the moment they are working on how to standardize, how to measure microplastic, especially nanoplastic, and even the methods how to screen for microplastic are still a bit uncertain in the different laboratories. So we are not on top of knowing the consequences of microplastic in the environment. But the scientists all together, they have concluded and they have advised the EU Commission that at this point, there are local areas where microplastic poses a danger to the local environment. If we continue as now, in the coming generations, microplastic will pose a more general threat to all ecosystems in the world. That's the scientific assessment and advice to the EU Commission. If we continue right now, it's going to pose a more global and general danger to the ecosystems.
Thank you. Do you see global plastic companies like Nestle changing their usage and production of plastic in the future? If so, how?
Yeah, I see them. I think they have committed to make a change in 2025 and make all the whole product range sustainable. And they were actually one of the first big companies out there. And I think they are on a travel. All these companies, we are all on a travel, because the first intuition is to change our plastic, different bottles, etc., into maybe paper or cardboard. I mean, something sustainable because it's biodegradable. But we have been working on, and the whole Break Free from Plastic movement is working, and UN is also in its coming plastic treaty working on a change away from single use, whether it's paper, it's plastic, or whatever material is. The real problem is single use. The real problem is if we don't reuse, if we don't build systems around products, because it's a single-use production and use of products that is creating both problems for the environment, for the animals, for ourselves, because we're eating plastic on our dinner plates, but also energy-related issues are really connected to whether we change our consumption patterns and reuse in the future.
Thank you. And what do you think about biodegradable plastics from organic products like potato peels? Do you think it will help?
Is it about biodegradable plastic?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I think I was a bit answering that in the last question, because I think biodegradable plastic will have its niche. There will be certain products. I mean, a diaper, or I mean, there are ways of using biodegradable materials where it really makes sense, because you can't really reuse it, and it's gonna be difficult also to recycle it. So in certain cases, with a system built around it. I mean, there was a case with diapers. I mean, that a project in Berlin where all the diapers were collected and they were decomposed, and you were planting trees and in the soil with all the diapers afterwards. So in such a controlled system where you actually can biodegrade the product and grow trees in the soil afterwards, that makes sense. But otherwise, we shouldn't look at biodegradability as a solution in the future.
Thank you. A question from Samuel. How are plastics affecting the development of marine plants, such as the mangroves and phytoplankton?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of scientists who are working to understand it, and on an ecosystem level. We have a project also in Denmark, a huge project looking at the ecosystem factors around how microplastic is affecting the local or in more general the ecosystems. What we know is that they need to cope and filter for example, all the fibers coming out of our textiles. When we wash our textiles, we are releasing hundreds of thousands of synthetic fibers. And for example, the bivalves, different species, they need to cope with all these, for them, not usable fibers and other fragments. But the understanding of what this means on ecosystem level is still to be answered.
Thank you. Actually, our time is over, but I will ask you the last question.
Okay.
Which country is the biggest polluter, you think?
Well, I think, I mean, we know that some of the rivers from India but also some rivers and countries in Asia are a heavy part of the pollution. But we should really reconsider whether they are or we are the biggest polluters, because we have been exporting all our plastic garbage to these countries and asking them to handle it in low income economies. So for China, for example, they just stopped importing plastic, but they took all our plastic and they picked the best parts, and the rest was that. I mean, is it on open land or is it in the oceans? We don't know, but we know it's our plastic often, and we know that we often design the products and the lack of systems around them. So I think we should really look at ourselves and our own overconsumption before we ask anyone else to act on this problem.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for a great presentation. You have still many questions, so It would be great if you could stay with us. And then after all the presentations, we will have some space for answering the questions. So I hope you will stay with us and answer a few of them additionally.
Of course, I'll be happy to.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. So now it's time to introduce another speaker. This time it will be a lady, Vidya Amarnath. Vidya Amarnath is Director, Plastic Waste Solutions and Carbon Capture and Storage in Paterson Energy. Previously a banking as well as a media professional, Vidya joined the startup bandwagon in 2016 with Paterson Energy. What started as a social initiative and concern for the environment in 2012 has now become a potential solution provider for the ever-increasing problem of plastic waste. As a part of the company's CSR activities, Vidya's work involves sensitizing corporates as well as youth on the importance of segregation of plastic waste. She has given talks to several schools on the impending problem, and she is also part of expert committee on energy at the Madras Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much, Vidya, for being with us today. We are looking forward to your presentation now. You can start to share your screen.
Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
All right. Good evening to everybody. And thank you, UBIC webinars, for giving me this opportunity. And it is really great to be part of this webinar with all the other speakers, Richard and Stéphane, who spoke before me, and Henrik. And I think also we've got another Stéphane who's going to be speaking right after me. So let me start off by speaking about my company, Paterson Energy. We are a Chennai-based, India-based startup which converts plastic waste into energy. I will talk about this as we go forward. I believe that storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to put ideas into the world today. So I'm going to start this webinar, or my part of the session, by telling you a story of 3 bottles: bottle A, bottle B, and bottle C. And you've seen this in various forms: shampoos, conditioners, and body wash, or maybe any other liquid, but they all come in these bottles. Okay. This is a story of 3 plastic waste objects, empty and discarded. Their journeys are about to diverge with outcomes that will impact nothing less than the fate of our planet. But they weren't always this way. To understand where these bottles end up, we must understand their origins. The heroes of our story were conceived in an oil refinery. The plastic in their bodies was formed by chemically bonding oil and gas molecules together to make monomers. In turn, these monomers are bonded into long polymer chains to make plastic in the form of millions of pellets. Those pellets are melted at manufacturing plants and reformed into molds to create the resilient bodies of our triplets. Machines fill these bottles with sweet, bubbly liquids or soaps or shampoos and conditioners, and then they are wrapped, shipped, bought, opened, consumed, and unceremoniously discarded. And now, here they lie, poised at the edge of the unknown. Bottle A, like millions and tons of its plastic brethren, ends up in a landfill. This huge dump expands each day as more trash comes in and continues to take up space. As plastics sit in this compressed lot among layers of other junk, rainwater flows through the water and the waste absorbs the water-soluble compounds it contains, and some of these are highly toxic. Together, they create a harmful stew called leachate, which can move into groundwater, soils, and streams, poisoning ecosystems and harming wildlife. It can take bottle 1 an agonizing 1,000 years to decompose. Now, bottle B. Bottle B's journey is stranger, but unfortunately not happier. He floats on a trickle that reaches a stream that flows into a river, and the river that reaches the ocean. After months at sea and slowly drawn by the massive vortex where trash accumulates at a place known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Here, the ocean's currents have trapped millions of pieces of plastic debris. This is one of 5 plastic-filled gyres in the world's seas, a place where the pollutants turn the water into a cloudy plastic soup. Now, just to give perspective about how large this area is about the area of the United States of America and India put together. That is how big this plastic dump yard is. A recent study by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation found by the year 2050, there will be more plastic by weight in seas and oceans than fish. Obviously, this shows that it is crucial for us to understand that fish are a vital part of our food chain. For example, it is eaten by the lanternfish. The lanternfish are eaten by squid. Squid are eaten by tuna, and the tuna are eaten by us. And most plastics don't biodegrade, as you've already heard Richard and say that previously. They only photodegrade. That means it takes an agonizing thousands of years for a small plastic cup to become smaller and smaller pieces of itself called microplastics. Okay. Now, how much plastic do we consume? We've already seen from the last slide that through the food chain, we are ingesting a lot of plastic waste. On an average, bottled water contains 22 times more microplastic than tap water. 130,000 particles per year are consumed on an average by an average adult drinking only from bottled water, which amounts to around 4,000 particles per year. Okay. This is statistics, which is an average from the global average. Only 5% of the plastic waste is being recycled. It could change from country to country, but when you take an average, it's only 5%. 12% gets incinerated. Incineration is no better because it causes so many toxic gases and pollution and adds to the greenhouse gases effect. 79% is accumulated in landfills and in natural environments. Now we know that 8.3 billion tons of plastic waste is produced annually. To put this into perspective, it is about 25,000 Empire State Buildings or about 1 billion elephants. So that is the size of the plastic waste that we generate every year. And the world's, have we seen this previously also, the world's worst plastic offenders are these companies which have, millions of tons of plastic which is used in their packaging, okay, which is Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, Danone, P&G, and the list goes on. And this is as per the study of 2020, right? So every year we listen to these companies being the top polluters and the top offenders. And every year we hear one of the top brass coming out with some program about how to deal with plastic waste. Although the intent is there, I'm not denying that most of these companies, there is an intent, but somehow we are not able to target, the reduction of plastic waste or effective recycling of plastic waste. Now, as plastics fill up and pollute our oceans, recognizing their value rather than thinking of them as disposable could help us deal with some of the problems that we are facing today. In today's world, plastic is essential raw material. Hence, since their invention in 1930s, plastic has become ubiquitous in the manufacture of everyday products. In 2019, the plastic industry alone accounted for 1.4 million jobs in over 62,000 companies across the European Union alone. As useful and versatile as plastics are, however, their unchecked disposal are causing an unprecedented scale-up in the global impact on wildlife and marine environmental pollution. So what I'm trying to say is that we have to recognize that since there are not effective solutions for plastic packaging yet, we do depend largely on plastic. So basically saying that let's avoid plastic totally in our packaging is not a possible and a viable scenario, at least in the near future, till technology comes out with more useful and viable solutions for plastic packaging. Now, in all this, we have forgotten the story of our bottles. We were on bottle C. Now, what happened to bottle C? Let's get back to bottle C and see how it solves the problem using science and clean technology.
Plastic to fuel systems produce spec-grade fuels and energy at lower costs than conventional energy systems. To begin the continuous pyrolysis process, we need a large and steady volume of sorted plastic. It arrives at our facilities in bales. The plastic is then shredded and blended, then pelletized and fed into the preheater, which liquefies the plastic on its way to the pyrolysis reactor, where it is gasified and distilled into diesel fuel, producing carbon char and co-generating steam and electricity. The recovered diesel fuel is then sold back to the shipping company as an environmentally friendly marine fuel. The electricity is sold to the local utility as green power, and the carbon char is sold to the local steel manufacturer, which creates a circular economy.
So as you can see, bottle C, because of the way it has been recycled and retreated and recovered to get useful energy and other products, it is one of the best and viable options to clean up the environment. And as you can see, the thermochemical depolymerization process is a circular economy. Now, the world economy is moving away from linear economy because of the amount of wastage it is causing, and basically because of the varied benefits that a circular economy model can give you. Firstly, reducing greenhouse gases, mitigating land degradation, promotes conservation of natural resources because it's offering alternate sources of fossil fuels, making businesses more resilient, increasing employment opportunities, improving economic growth and GDP, increases demand in services, and helps better understanding of clients and their needs. Now, at Paterson Energy, we are a startup which converts waste plastic to energy using a thermochemical depolymerization process. Now, what is this process? In short, the thermochemical depolymerization process is a process in which waste plastic is heated in the absence of oxygen at very high temperatures between 350 degrees centigrade to 500 degrees centigrade. And we derive a very high grade diesel variant, which has varied applications, which I will come to later in the presentation. Now, all of you might imagine that what happens when these plastic is heated. Of course, there are a lot of toxic gases that are generated, but in our process, we capture these gases and we reroute them as heating agents to our reactor in such a way that it becomes completely green. So therefore, there is zero effluent and zero emissions. So let me take you to what happens in the pyrolysis process. Basically, the waste plastic, as I already told you, is cleaned and shredded and allocated into appropriate mix to get a top quality yield. The shredded plastic is then fed into a reactor through an airlock valve and heated under controlled conditions. The reactor is initially heated by using furnace oil. Later, as I explained earlier, that the gases that are produced, the syn gases or the synergy gases or the flue gases, are reused to keep the temperature of the reactors at an optimum temperature. During the process, carbon black is produced, and that is collected separately in bags. The flue gas generated is due to a thermochemical reactions in the reactor. The vaporized gases are passed through heat exchangers where it is condensed into a high-grade diesel variant. The heat exchangers use coolant water as the condensing medium, and this water is recirculated. Therefore, there is no discharge of cooling water medium. So therefore, you can see we have applied the circular economy model to our thermochemical depolymerization technology and try to get the most out of the plastic waste instead of just dumping it into landfills where they create a lot of pollution or damaging the marine ecosystem. I have already explained this to you, the whole process of feeding and then getting into the reactor and how we ultimately get the fuel. Now, what are the various types of plastics that are acceptable in our system? Those are HDPE, high density polyethylene, low density polyethylene, polypropylene, and polystyrene. These are the materials. So basically, these are the single-use plastic and everyday use plastics that are up until now, relegated as being public litter, and very little could be done with them. Now, because of this technology and because you can get a mix of all these varieties of plastic, you can actually apply it to our technology and get high yields of fossil fuels. Now, Paterson Energy commenced its operations in the year 2013 with its pilot plant in Chennai. It was initially a 1-ton plant, which was upgraded later to a larger capacity. Looking at the process and the success of our tests, the Government of India in 2016 awarded us with a tender to set up a plant in Mathura, which is very close to the Taj Mahal. I'm sure most of you would know the 7 wonders, the Taj Mahal, which is one of the pride of India, under something called the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or the Clean India project. This project is one of its kind, a public-private partnership, wherein we've got a viability gap funding from Engineers India, which is one of the PSUs, a very, very a well-known PSU. And the Government of India now plans to put up 40 such similar plants in tourist area in the country. Paterson Energy has received several grades of certification on its plant, right from design certification, materials that have been used are certified by TUV Germany. We have quality manufacturing certificates from Lloyds and SGS. We have taken care of hazardous operations by the Hazard Council of India, standards of process certified by independent industry consultants. We have IoT and remote monitoring systems in place, SCADA and PLC controlled, and it's monitored, as I told you, by remote monitoring systems, whereby I'm trying to tell you that it is a very, very safe and it can be a very, very viable option and scaled up according to the client's need, depending upon their individual preferences. And we can go from anywhere from 3 ton onwards to build these plants. Now, coming to applications of these plants, of the oil that is produced. The oil, as I already mentioned, is a high-grade diesel variant. Therefore, it can be used in all industrial purposes, wherein you use your furnace oil or burners. You can use it in your construction and mining, industrial boilers, casting furnaces, rotary kiln, construction industries. It can be used as a variant to run your diesel generators. One of the greatest opportunities of this oil, which we have branded as Vertex, is that it is about 25% lower than other oils, other hydrocarbon fuels, and because of which companies can not only adopt a circular economy, but also can save up on their costs by replicating their the fossil fuels and using our pyrolysis oil or Vertex fuel. Okay, so One of the studies that was conducted by McKinsey in 2018 shows that the most effective plastic technologies for reconverting plastic waste into cracker feedstocks that could displace naphtha and natural gas liquid demands is a process which they rightly call pyrolysis, which we also call as the thermochemical depolymerization. So they have done a study and they have shown that pyrolysis is a very, very effective solution while using reconverting our waste plastic into cracker feedstocks. And so here you can see that this scenario, of course, is based on a multi-stakeholder push to boost recycling, and regulatory measures are in place. And of course, I have already told you that a specific kind of waste material, if is the feedstock for pyrolysis, can be very effective solution for waste recycling and getting waste to energy in place. So as we have already heard that, we have to, the most favored option would obviously be reducing the use of plastic. But having said that, if it is not always possible to reduce, reuse, and recycle, recovery of energy from waste stands a good chance in this whole system to get recycling and to move towards, a safer environment and reduce the impact of the 2-degree climate change that we are all worried about. So instead of it going to our landfills, instead of it going to marine oceans and causing a whole lot of damage to the environment, through our process of thermochemical depolymerization, we are able to recover energy from waste. And this, working in tandem with all the other R's of reduce, reuse, and recycle, can be a wholesome and a viable option to contain plastic pollution. Thank you, and I'm now open for your questions.
Thank you very much, Vidya, for a very nice presentation. We have many questions for you. So let's just start. There is a comment from Norman. You said, Vidya, that the toxic gases are used as heating agents, but what happens to them after? As I understand a bit chemistry, the toxins not just disappear into green, clean air. The toxic end products must be still somewhere around. So can you
yeah, you are right, Norman. We do, the process is such that we store these toxic gases in a balloon and they are continuously rerouted to the reactor. Now, the reactor heat, as I told you, is at 350 to 600 degrees. Therefore, a lot of these flue gases or the syn gases are already utilized to keep the temperature. And what is not utilized is again stored either in cylinders to be used for other purposes, or we send them to scrubbers where they are neutralized and therefore they are not sent into the environment. So what I'm trying to say is most of it is neutralized by their use itself in the reactor to maintain the reactor temperature, but what is already left is either stored in cylinders for later use, or they are neutralized by using scrubbers.
Thank you for your answer. Harriet is saying, as diesel is a serious pollutant, considering the production of diesel engine car engines are being phased out, how will turning plastic into diesel help anything?
So firstly, our variant is not an automobile variant. It is an industrial fuel. And I agree that though we may not be able to completely contain the carbon monoxide from the use, but our gas is almost zero on the sulfur. So any ensuing pollution caused by sulfur dioxide or sulfur is completely nullified. So we have to always do an exercise of considering the lesser evil here. So obviously here, with our technology, we're reducing the incidence or the pressure on fossil fuels and giving you an alternate for fossil fuels. So naturally, you're going to use lesser and lesser fuels. Now, the second alternative can also be, instead of getting oil, you can also send these gases, the hydrocarbon gases that are captured during the process, and generate electricity through a grid. So it is customizable depending upon the option that the client requires. Now, let's not forget that we are here because we are looking at solutions to plastic pollution. And this is one of the solutions so we have to see we have to do a comparative exercise as to what is the pollution caused by plastic, what is the damage it's causing, and we should also figure out what are the problems created by using. So as I can see that the problems caused by using this gas are minimal as compared to using plastic. I mean, using just letting plastic be on the surface of the earth and causing so much damage. While I also maintain that instead of getting oil, you can also generate electricity. So that way, you can have a customizable solution.
Thank you for the answer. Niklas is asking, what are the biggest challenges in deploying this technology worldwide?
Right. So this would require a little bit more of my time because I have approached a lot of, these big companies, and I have told you that, we've seen Coca-Cola, Nestle, Pepsi coming every year in the papers saying that they were the biggest polluters. But one of the problems that I constantly face when I take these technologies to these large companies is, firstly, that the decision making is not, handed over to those, at the top. Decision making is still with the middle level people who are more concerned about parallel verticals on plastic waste. So they would rather give their plastic waste to a recycler whom they do not know the antecedents and precedents. They don't know how they treat their plastic, but they run a parallel vertical of selling plastic waste, which amounts to, a certain number of dollars or whatever, equivalent that country is in. What they don't understand is that, by adopting this technology, they are going to build a brand which is conscious about the environment, and, they're going to double up their income through brand building consciousness about the environment more than a narrow-minded approach of merely selling plastic waste. So this is one of, the problems that I constantly face. Secondly, although most of the plastic management rules worldwide, there is something called the extended producer responsibility, which mandates that all producers, users of plastic, are responsible for the plastic waste that they generate. We hardly see these practices put into place. So the rules are not stringent on these companies. Thirdly, when we talk about Europe, now 15 to 29%, it is mandated in the European Union that about 15 to 29% of energy utilization should come from advanced biofuels. Now, in 2018-19, they have included oils generated from plastic, that is plastic oil or pyrolysis oil, into the advanced biofuels. So a lot of companies and a lot of governments can, adhere to these rules by just using plastic oil. So their energy utilization will straight away come from 15 to 29%. The fourth thing is people are not using their social responsibilities, corporate social responsibility funds, CSR funds that are available in huge numbers towards these projects. We are still in that approach of looking at ROIs on investments. Like all technologies, the pyrolysis or the TCD technology will take a few years to stabilize. So we need to get the message out to the world that we have a problem in hand and we have a solution. Rather than looking always at economics of stuff, let's look at some of social responsibilities and then the investments and the ROIs and the other things will fall in place.
Thank you. You have many questions, so I will choose two, and then if you can stay with us for the discussion after the presentations, you can answer more questions. So would you mind mentioning some of the neutralized chemicals that are released into the environment? This would help us know whether there is a net gain in carbon footprint in this project.
See, on the top of my head, I can tell you it's methane, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen. Hydrogen forms a very, very large percentage. In fact, one of the endeavors of our technology is to see that we are able to capture hydrogen and create electric fuel car cells, hydrogen cells, which will, can be used to rev electric cars in the future. So these are some of the gases. And whoever has asked the question, you can visit my website, Paterson Energy, which has all the other gases in the minutest of percentages there.
Great. And the last question, how expensive is this technology? Is it accessible for areas with mass poverty, which also are the ones that lack of waste, the plastic waste disposition?
So this is a very loaded question. It's a subjective question. It depends upon the intent of the government of that country, of the corporation, of the big companies in that country. To actually mitigate plastic waste. So there has to be an exercise that is done, which, where you see what is the damage that is done and what is the economic, drain on the company or the country because of climate change or because of plastic pollution. So you can, of course, this technology is capital intensive, but its benefits, outweigh the cost of the equipment or the cost of the technology. So in my opinion, it is very, very easy for large corporations like Coca-Cola, Nestle, or, of companies or countries, even developing countries to, get assistance through joint ventures and other such initiatives to put up such plants. And we have varying capacities from 3 ton onwards. So you can customize your solutions depending on the need. And don't forget that this is not just mitigating plastic waste, it also gives you something in return. So there is some recovery that is happening from it. And therefore, you have to do this exercise of ascertaining what your problem is, what is the economic drain on your country, and then you can find a solution. In my opinion, the world over, the solution can be applied at a very little cost.
Thank you very much, Vidya, for presenting this technology. I hope you will stay with us and you will answer additional questions because there are many for you. Thank you again. And now it's time to move on and to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Richard Hardiman, who is a CEO in Ranmarine. Richard is the CEO in Ranmarine Technology, a Netherlands-based USV unmanned surface vessels company. A graduate of the GSB Cape Town, Richard has been involved in a number of businesses, both as startups and scale-ups, since graduating in 2009. In 2016, Richard embarked on his most ambitious project yet, developing a waterborne drone that harvests plastic waste from the world's ports, harbors, rivers, and marinas in an effort to reduce the effect of plastic pollution on the Earth's oceans. Richard's company, based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, now produces the Waste Shark, which has been exported globally to USA, UAE, India, Germany, and South Africa. Added to the Waste Shark's ability to collect waste, Ranmarine has now also pioneered the collection of live data from waterborne drones to measure waterhead quality. Ranmarine Technology was founded in 2016 and now is headquartered in the Netherlands. Thank you, Richard, for joining us today and presenting Ranmarine. So you can start to share your presentation now.
Thank you very much. Allow me to just find my screen, which I think will help there. Okay, I trust that is that's shared okay.
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for having me today, and I've really been riveted by everyone speaking ahead of me, and I'm glad that you kind of laid the seeds of thought for what I'm about to talk about. Just very quickly, what is Ranmarine? We're a collection of engineers, enthusiasts, innovators, and problem solvers, and our main product is the Waste Shark. It's an ASV. It's a autonomous surface vessel, and it's designed to take plastic out of water. And I'll take you through the journey of how we got to where we were. We're now a team of 15, 17 people, but we started out as one person, myself, a long time ago. But what we do now is we create hardware to capture plastic waste, biomass out of water. We give that hardware a brain using our software, and then we allow our customers to interact with that brain and that hardware using a cloud-based interface. And we also add to that sensor data. So we've allowed our robots to collect water quality data wherever they are, and that feeds them back into our back to our clients. But that's where we are now. Where we started was far more humble and far less fancy, I guess. Way back in 2012, 2013, I was in my native city, Cape Town, South Africa, although we're now based in Rotterdam. And I was literally here. This is the waterfront in Cape Town in front of that magnificent Table Mountain, which is so well known around the world. And I was watching two men in a boat employed by the Port Authority there attempt to take plastic out of water. And at the time, I had no knowledge of why they were removing the plastic waste, other than I suppose one should take plastic out of the water at that time. But they were trying to take plastic bottles out. They were trying to, there was takeaway packets, fast food packets sort of floating in the water. But they had this enormous boat to do it. And one guy was driving the enormous boat, and the other guy had this net that he was reaching into the water and trying to scrape the water out of the surface. And I thought to myself as I was having this cup of coffee that maybe this is how we do it in Africa. I'm sure around the world we have much better technology, but here this is how we do it. And it looks fairly ineffective. I had no idea of the problem of plastic in marine environments at the time. I was just watching what I thought was this incredibly inefficient process of removing stuff and debris from water. And I started playing around with a napkin in front of me and a pen that I had, and thinking how would I solve this? How would I solve this problem of taking whatever they were trying to take out of the water? And I didn't really have knowledge, as I say, of the plastic pollution at the time. I had no knowledge of robotics. I just wanted to find a more efficient way of doing the job that they were attempting to do. And this started leading me down this rabbit warren of plastics and plastics in water, and particularly single-use plastics, which we've heard a lot about today. And as I started thinking about this, I started to follow, and Vidya, your storytelling is far better than mine, but I started following the process of literally a plastic bottle in a city. And try as you might, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, any city that's based around water, any town or village that's based around a river, around a port, around a canal, there will be leakage of waste into that water. And most of those water systems enter our oceans through a port or a canal directly into the sea. So we track these bottles, and particularly I talk about single-use plastic. This bottle in front of us right now is probably used for 2 or 3 minutes. The water is drunk, and then we potentially throw it into a waste paper bin, into a waste receptacle of some sorts. Maybe that is overflowing, it lands up on the pavement, it blows into the canal, which goes into the port, which goes out into the greater ocean. And predominantly it ends up like this, chokeholes of plastic in ports and canals where we generally work. This is kind of our daily fare. This is our bread and butter of what we're trying to clean up. And predominantly, we're trying to clean that up before it goes outside into the ocean. So anything inside a harbor wall, in coastal, inside a river, in a lake, we're trying to extract that plastic before it gets out into the greater ocean. And I think for very obvious reasons. I don't know how many millions of tons have ended up in the oceans around the world now, and there's varying reports, and we've seen a lot of them today. But it's millions upon millions upon millions of single-use or just discarded waste that we should have done something about with on land. We didn't think about it, and we let it end up in a marine environment where I think ultimately, you know, these beautiful creatures are suffering more and more. And I think we're only waking up to it now because it's starting to enter our food chain. As fish are starting to eat these microplastics, it's coming back to us. We're now worried about what we're consuming, but we caused the problem in the first place. So if I go back to that day where I was sitting at the waterfront and I was having my cup of coffee, my first thought was, we need robots to do this. Taking waste out of water is not something that humans want to do or should do, but inevitably we have to if we want to stem the tide of what's going out there. The process of what we've been doing so far clearly hasn't worked. We've seen those horrifying images of how much plastic ends up in an ocean, in a gyre, in the Pacific. If what we were doing right now was working, we wouldn't have that problem. So we need a modern problem to solve this, a modern solution rather, to solve this modern problem. And one of my ideas was, those of you who have children or grew up with WALL-E will know that WALL-E is a robot that was left behind by humans on Earth because Earth had just become inhospitable. There was too much waste, there was too much rubbish, and they left a bunch of robots to clean up Earth and compact the stuff and move it around, while the humans got in spacecraft and left the planet until such time that the robots had done their job and Earth was once more inhabitable again. And they often say that art imitates truth, and I think we're heading that way fairly quickly, that at some point, if we don't do something, our normal environment is going to be inhospitable to us, not only to marine life, but to us as humans. So I believe a robot is something that works around the clock. It does the things that humans can't or won't do. They're really good at robotic, repetitive tasks. That's what robots are good at. They will do things over and over again. So in this particular case, if we use the robot to clean up plastic, we wouldn't see these buildup of plastics in the water. We would constantly maintain that landscape and make sure that anything that went in the day before was taken out the day after. We gather data with robots all the time. They're linked to networks. They gather data, put that data in the database, and for us, they learn their environment. So if a robot goes out at any time, it understands every single time it goes out, it understands its environment better. So our robot is this, the Waste Shark. It is probably the size of a coffee table, 50 centimeters deep, and has a mouth at the front that's about 1.5 meters wide, and catches whatever's in front of it. Now, its purpose is to catch plastic, but it might catch other debris that's been thrown into the water as well, or leaked into the water. And I think if you think of it as a Roomba for water, it's an iRobot, a vacuum cleaner, one of these automated vacuum cleaners that so many people have nowadays in their house. We want that for water, so that's why we invented this particular robot. It's capable of holding 240 liters of trash at any one time. It's small, but it can remove 500 kilograms, half a ton a day in a normal working period. So 8 hours a day, it can take out half a ton of plastic. It has 10 hours of operation before it needs recharging. It's battery operated, so it has zero emissions when it's in the water. We're moving quite quickly to powering those batteries or recharging those batteries through solar power. So that really sort of starts closing the circle on how much actual emissions we use to power one of these. In a month, it probably costs just slightly more to power this than it does your average TV set in a home. As I say, 10 hours of battery operation and the ability to take out half a ton of trash every single day. We started in 2016 as a company here in Rotterdam, working out who we could sell to, who would want these machines, and refining the product that we offer to our market. So typically, right now downstairs in our facility, we're sending out drones, ASVs, Waste Sharks to Lebanon, to South Africa, to the USA, to Turkey. These are just some of the places that are on our floor right now that will be receiving these sharks in the next few weeks. And in this picture, I can show you pictures of our partners in Nigeria, in Dubai, here in the Netherlands, in Singapore, and Cape Town as well. So we're finding that cities, governments who are now being pressured into doing something about the waste in our water in their own waters. So we look for customers that have an authority over the water space. We don't wait till the waste goes out into the ocean. It's really difficult to capture that waste once it's out there, incredibly expensive, and no one really wants to take responsibility for it. So we go to a place where there's a customer. We say to a government entity like a city or a waterways management entity, you need to clean up this waste. You're already doing it, but we want to offer you a more efficient tool to do so. So we sell our products, which we believe are more efficient tools, do a better job than what's out there at the moment, because quite clearly what we're doing at the moment is not working. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these problems. We go for low cost, low effort. Drones, robots are easy to throw into the water, let them clean up and bring that waste back to shore. Then that waste can be dealt with ethically again. Every time that we partner with a company who sells our drones or buys our drones, we make sure that whatever they're doing with that waste is not just put into a landfill, it's not just burnt, that it's ethically recycled as much as it can be, and whatever waste is caught is dealt with properly. We have flexible use cases, so we not only collect waste out of plastic waste out of water, we can also collect harmful algae and bio waste that's causing toxicity to the water that damages marine life further. So it's not just about taking plastic out, although we are talking about plastics and sustainability here, and that is our main focus. But we have a number of different use cases for our drones. Something we're quite excited about at the moment is we're completing the autonomy circle. So at the moment, our drones come in autonomous versions. You can set a path, they swim around, they have LiDAR on the top of them so they can sense danger, stop, pull out of the way of moving craft, or navigate their way around static objects. But then they have to come back to shore, and we have to take the customer has to take the drone out of the water, empty the basket out, and then put it back in the water to continue on its journey. This is what we're calling the shark pod. We've teamed up with the European Commission here in Europe to develop this. And that shoe shape that you see in front of you has a conveyor belt inside it. So our sharks literally dock inside the shark pod. They flush the waste that they've caught. All of that goes up into a giant receptacle inside that can take a couple of tons of waste, and then they go out, the drone goes out and into these little side modules that you see, numbered 1, 2, 4, and 5, where they recharge. All of that is controlled from a cloud-based interface. So no longer do humans have to go out onto the water, risk themselves trying to collect waste, or try and collect waste all the way through the winter, or those kind of things. In any weather conditions, we can now send drones out. They can retrieve the waste, bring it back to a central hub, park, recharge, and then go back out again. So we've created a 24-hour autonomous system that can be used in a smart city, a smart port, or a lake system that might have particular problems with waste. And of course, what we do there is then allow the authority to come by once a week, once a month, depending on the amount of waste they have, extract that waste that's in the hub inside, and we start again. So what we're hoping here is that the easier we make it for a smart city or for a smart port to collect waste in their waters, the better we can start curing the problem and being part of the solution. We are using technology to, I think, build a suite of products now. I think you're the first audience that we've spoken about this, but we're introducing a mega shark into our arena in the next 2 to 3 months. There's a lot of vessels that do this kind of job, but they all use diesel power or fuels. We want to introduce a 3.5 meter by 2 meter vessel that can collect up to a ton of waste every single time it goes out, but it's battery powered. So it's far more efficient, it's quieter, it's a lot cheaper to fuel, and a lot less impactful on the space that it's interacting with. We're very excited about this. We're introducing it into India first, where there is a big demand for it, but also we want to test it there as well and make sure that what we're introducing is fit for purpose. So we're quite excited about the Mega Shark. It's the next step up for us, and obviously it's autonomous as well. So we're using everything that we've been building over the last 4 years to culminate in this bigger autonomous vessel. I'm very excited about it. I think I've rushed through this very quickly, and I apologize. So maybe it helps then that I've left some time for questions. But our main aim in life is to develop technology that helps our environment. And we're a very committed bunch of innovators and engineers here at Ranmarine that want to clean up the environment using the studies that we've been through, the experience that we have in robotics, technology, and design to create a better environment for the rest of the planet. So that's really all I have to say. I guess I'm happy to take questions and answer any that might arise now.
Thank you very much, Richard, for the presentation. Yes, we have some questions from the audience. So, for example, Richard, can the waste shark only catch solid big plastic waste? Any plans for microplastics, or also what is the smallest size of plastic you can collect?
So as we're at the threshold of microplastics, we catch up to a 5 millimeter, and we have a mesh that goes inside that can go down to a millimeter. So that's kind of the space that we play in. Although if I go back to where we actually operate, we try and catch fresh plastic. So plastic that was entering the water that morning or that afternoon, and using our maintenance tools to take that out all the time. So we might catch some microplastics, but our idea is to catch that plastic before it can be degraded and sort of, ends up as microplastics further down the line. So we can catch some small plastics up to a millimeter, but our focus is on catching that fresh plastic, as it were, out of the water and dealing with that very quickly.
Thank you. Doesn't the robot capture marine life in the process, or do you track this somehow?
We don't. The marine life, obviously we operate every single day. We've got customers using these things around the world. Marine life treats our robots like normal marine vessels. So they hear it coming. There's a slight sort of whine in the motors. They swim away from it. Here in Rotterdam, we have a lot of swans in the rivers that we test in. They just ignore it. They treat it like a normal vessel. It doesn't move fast enough to catch fish. We obviously catch anything that may have sort of died in the water. Obviously, those kind of fish, dead fish, we do catch, unfortunately. But we've never had a problem with catching actual marine life. They're too quick. We don't move fast enough, and we're only after the floating plastic.
Thank you for the answer. Don't you get challenges with shark bots being caught up in fishing nets, rocks, or corals?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So again, we don't operate in any area that's particularly environmentally dangerous, or sort of where we would consider operating to be dangerous to the environment. So yes, our sharks do occasionally get caught up in something that's floating around like ropes, but they tend to free themselves. They have a really good way of extricating themselves out of most problems. But obviously, as they float around, they occasionally do get stuck, and we send boats out to release them. But in the main, they've got a very shallow draft, so that they don't hit rocks. In areas where we're working with tidal systems, they only get sent up when it's sort of medium to high tide, and certainly before that tide goes back out again. So we tend to try and get in there just as the trash has been pushed into a particular corner because of the tidal wind, get rid of that trash, and then the tide goes out and we're out of the water along with the plastic before that happens.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mike is asking, does colder water affect the lasting of the battery? Do the robots need to be charged more often?
It does, very similar to autonomous cars. Weather conditions affect the temperature of the batteries. So colder weather obviously does affect it. We've done a lot of trials in Denmark at the moment, where we've got a number of units up there, and we do see a decrease. It's not too much. Our batteries are able to operate in anywhere from -5 to +50 degrees. We don't see a massive degradation, but obviously it does affect it slightly, but maybe 5% to 10% on really, really bad use cases.
Mm-hmm. Samuel is asking, does it require expertise and intensive training to run or operate Waste Shark?
No, that's one of the best parts about it. We've made this thing as simple as possible to use. So as complicated as our software is inside, it can be used with a remote control. So I have my children who play with them all the time. They're fascinated by this kind of technology. And obviously I find the younger generations are more enthused about using robots to clean up what essentially is their parents' fault, I guess. It's very simple. Within 5 minutes, you can be operating one of these. And the way we've designed the autonomous version is incredibly intuitive. So it's literally, you have a map in front of you where the shark is, and you just press where you would like it to go. It closes the loop, and the shark goes on that journey. So it's really intuitive, very easy, and I would say within half an hour, you'd be quite comfortable with using these.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. Luvoyo is asking, does the Mega Shark collect data on the type of waste and the weight of the waste?
Certainly the weight, yeah. So we monitor that side of things, and with the Shark Pod, it's quite interesting that we can now start tying these you know, as a shark goes out on a particular day in a particular wind or tide and brings back that detritus, we can weigh that and we can start working out very usefully when is the best time to go out and collect waste, when is the most waste brought into a harbor or into a canal. We can start working those things out through legacy data over the next few years. We can't tell what type of waste it is. Unfortunately, right now, we're quite agnostic to that. We do use image recognition, but it's very hard to use image recognition in water with light refraction. And a plastic bag, for instance, changes shape all the time. So it's very hard to say that's a plastic bag. So again, we rely on our partners to separate the waste that comes out, weigh that particular waste, and then tell us what element is recyclable, what element is not recyclable, and then enter that into our portal in the back end, and we start building data that way. So data input in that respect is still quite manual based. I'm hoping in the future that we'll make that automated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the answer. Nicholas is asking if this would be deployed globally, how much of the annual plastic waste that ends up in the ocean could be prevented?
It's a great question. We're working on the shark pod, for instance, where we know that if we have 5 drones operating, that we can initially take 2.5 tons out of a day of a particular area. With efficiency built into that, as they start learning their environment, they start talking to each other, they start telling each other where to go on a particular day, a particular tide, a particular wind. We could probably increase that to 5 tons a day per shark pod. And the extrapolation of that is, I mean, we're talking 100, 200 tons a month quite easily, and the more we deploy, the better we get. So yeah, it's difficult to say right now, but I really believe that on a 24-hour basis, automated, we can make a huge impact into the amount of waste that's going out into our oceans. Unfortunately, we're maybe 10 years too late, but our technology didn't exist back then. But certainly, I think we can make a very strong impact along with others who have similar solutions into reducing that waste into the ocean quite quickly.
Great. And can you tell us what is the cost of waste shark in dollars? So
the base model is around 12,000 euros. We're trying to bring that down as quickly as possible. Obviously, there's a lot of technology in there. As we start selling more, going to volume, going to scale, we're hoping to halve that price quite quickly again. Certainly like to be looking at doing that by the middle of next year and making it more accessible to more people. We obviously do deals with NGOs where we see the value of what the work they're doing. So yeah, they can range from anywhere right now from 12.5 to 30,000 euros a time. But their lifespan and what they actually achieve, the return on that investment is quite quick compared to current solutions.
Mm-hmm, perfect. And there is also a question, how heavy are those sharks? How many people are required to take one out of the water?
So it's 2 people. We have also what we call shark sliders, deployment mechanisms where one person can use it. But in general, use 2 people to put it in and take it out. But when it's in the water, just one person.
And another interesting question, do you use plastic in building the sharks? Can they be recycled at the end of their lifetime? For how long do they operate on average? On
average, they have a lifespan of around 10 years. That's what we haven't been around for 10 years, but we are surmising that that's their useful life. They can be recycled in their current form. It's more difficult to recycle. We're very open to the fact that the current hull that we're using is not the most efficient from a recycling point of view. We are now moving over to a rotomolded hull, which can be 100% recycled and turned back into more hulls. So it's part of our process. Unfortunately, all these things cost a lot of money, and to get to the point where you can make it 100% recyclable costs a lot of money, but we're nearly there and we'll be there by the end of this year. And from there, then we hope to be using recycled plastic to make the hulls. So everything that goes out should be completely recycled, and everything that we catch goes back into helping us make more of these units. So we're getting there rapidly. We're not there yet, but it's certainly on our roadmap.
Great. Thank you for all those answers. And again, thank you for accepting being here with us and sharing your story. Now it's time to move on and to introduce our last speaker. So our last speaker is Mr. Stephen Horrey, who was born in Coventry and from the ages of 7 till 15 was a chorister in the Coventry Cathedral Choir. That involved attending the cathedral for rehearsals before school 4 days a week and singing at 3 services over the weekend. It taught him to be an early riser and helped develop his organizational skills. His career has been within the civil service, a number of positions in a large multinational company, managing 2 law firms, a self-employed sales agent in the family business, developing his own businesses, and from his passion to protect and preserve the environment, being a founder, director of Waste2 Environmental Systems Limited. Stephen has been a special constable and has sung in the rock choir. Currently supports a number of local community charities, organizations, both financially and volunteering for them on litter picks and fundraising days. We are very honored to have Stephen here today, and we are ready for your presentation. So you can start to share your screen.
Oh.
Yes, we can see you now.
Okay.
Perfect. Yes, we can see your presentation. Great.
Very good. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Very interesting. I've listened to all the speakers that have gone before me. Some very interesting, innovative ideas on the whole subject of today, which is climate change and sustainability. So last but not least, hopefully, we're looking at repurposing food waste into renewable energy. Okay, if it won't allow me to change the screen. Like that?
Try again to click on the presentation if it won't be working. Yes, it goes now. Perfect.
Okay, so Waste2 Environmental Systems Limited has been formed by like-minded people looking to better the world. It's a fairly new company, but we have had some good initial progress. Our aims are to provide innovative, sustainable solutions to promote a circular economy, valorize and repurpose our food and other organic wastes, ensuring 0% to landfill, reduce food-related carbon footprint, and we work closely with stakeholders to ensure their needs are met. So the first question for people, food currently wasted in Europe could feed how many people?
Okay, so I've launched the poll. Now the participants can vote, and I will let you know as soon as I will end the polling. So let's wait for a few seconds. They are still voting, so okay. Let's wait. Perhaps you can show in the meantime the answers, I mean the options for our YouTube participants also to see those options.
Right.
Okay, I think it's time to end the polling, so I will share the results.
Wow, okay, interesting. It's actually 200 million people, and that means hunger could be eradicated with a joined up approach.
Also for our YouTube participants to understand that the majority of our participants thought it's 150 million.
Okay. Right. So some facts. Around 1/3 of the total food produced in the world for human consumption is wasted every year. So roughly 1.3 billion tons. In the UK, we waste over 10 million tons a year, costing the economy an estimated £9.7 billion. That is an average of £540 per household. Out of that, 25% of the world's freshwater supply is used to grow food that is never eaten. And that's not a great story for sustainability. So what can we do about it? Well, first of all, what does food waste, what gas is emanated from decomposing food waste?
Okay, I've launched the poll, so people are voting now.
Okay.
Let's wait 2 more seconds. Okay, I think we can end the poll. So I will share the results.
Excellent. Very good. Correct. 80% correct. Yeah, it is. Methane, which is actually 45 times more damaging to the planet than carbon dioxide. So what can we do about it? Well, sustainable practices can repurpose food waste into renewable resources and preserve our environment. How do we want to do this? Well, how much of the world's fresh water supply is used to grow food that's never eaten?
Okay, they are voting. Let's wait for 2 more seconds.
Okay.
Okay, I think we can end the poll and share results.
Yeah, very good. That's right. Most of you got this right again. 25%. Wasting food grown for human consumption threatens the most valuable resource on Earth. And we already know in certain countries, they are fast running out of fresh water. So how can we make the most of unavoidable food waste? We've heard a lot this afternoon. We can reduce waste by planning meals in advance, reuse leftovers and freeze for another day. We can reuse the material as a resource, capturing the methane through a localized anaerobic digestion process that produces energy and organic fertilizer. And we can recycle. So we can recycle your organic waste so that it can be repurposed into renewable energy locally. Now, this isn't rocket science, and we're not reinventing the wheel, but Waste2ES has a system, and it's a little like mobile phones. When they first came out, they were bricks, and they are now they're wafers. The same with our anaerobic system, digestion system. When they were first made, they were regionalized systems, very large, 200,000 ton a year upwards. We have now developed, and working with a company, developed a system that will fit into a 40-foot container. So it's compact and it's modular. A 40-foot container can process up to 5 tons of food organic waste a day. So by keeping the resources local, we minimize the environmental impact. So the 200,000 ton a year centralized anaerobic digestion system means in effect there are 5,000 lorries on the road carrying 40 tons each a year. That's 100 lorries a week. So what is the carbon footprint of that? Our aim is to keep it local. Large-scale systems are costly, but we can keep this local so the people who generate the food waste can then benefit from the energy produced from that food waste. So with it being anaerobic digestion, we capture the methane. That is then burnt through a turbine to create energy, electricity, heat, or biofuel. And at the end of the day, because we also have a pasteurizer system built in, the digestate comes out as liquid or solid and can be split and then redistributed to the local farmers on the land, and which reduces their impact for artificial fertilizers. The carbon footprint, again, is significant, 40-foot container, and we'll probably have a 40-foot container sitting alongside with storage tanks, depending on the regularity of food waste being generated. We can store it and then pump it into our system, the digestate, which is in effect a big stomach, which will be working continuously 24/7, 365 days a year. So, food waste facts. Global food waste, food loss and waste accounts for how many gigatons of annual greenhouse gas emissions?
Okay, let's wait for voting.
Yeah.
Let's wait for 2 more seconds. Okay, I think we can end the poll and share results.
Okay. It's a very good audience today. Got it right again, 4.4 gigatons annually. Now, in the UK, a lot of food waste, 10 million tons a year, goes to landfill. And if we can get to zero, that reduces the amount of greenhouse gases. And what comes out of our compact AD system, there's a little bit of CO2, but otherwise everything is neutral. And by burning off the methane, which is the most harmful gas, 15% of what is burnt is used to power our system. So it's self-powering, and the rest for the customer, the commercial customer, is their benefit. And it's time for people on Earth to act on food waste. So the concept has been to generate power locally from locally produced waste. As I've mentioned before, it reduces the carbon footprint of taking waste away. And also it then turns waste from the word waste into a resource, and a resource for a company that instead of costing them money to take away from an expense becomes a revenue, because by processing through our system on site, generating not all of their electricity, but an element of their electricity at a reasonable rate of investment return, it can produce power, heat, or biofuel. And again, if it's a food producer or a food manufacturer, the digestate can then be returned to some of their suppliers to feed on, to put on their land, which helps the soil enrich the soil. So it's a fully circular economy. What other benefits we can make? Well, if we put, say, a compact AD system in a council waste depot, so it can produce local electricity, either for the depot itself or any offices on site, or biofuel for the waste trucks. But also it means the council, as part of their benefit, can be encouraged to install more EV charging points around the area or provide district heating for social housing. And these are all things that we can help towards the future. In England recently, there's an EV garage been set up, and it's powered by a landfill site next door. And what they are doing is capturing the methane that's coming out of all the ventilation shafts on that landfill site and converting it into energy. So last question. So in which month is World Food Day?
Okay, let's wait for 2 more seconds. Okay, I think we can end the poll and share results.
Yep. 16th of October. World Food Day, and the future is in our hands. So just going back to the compact AD system, we also have developed and designed new machines that can sit in large-scale restaurants, hotel, hospitality events that you can feed with the food waste, and that eliminates the moisture content and leaves it with a sandy residue that retains all the calorific and nutrient values. So you've got almost a hub and spoke concept. If we have a hub being our 40-foot container, within a 10-mile, 20-mile radius, you could have a number of spokes, these smaller units. And because it reduces the water content, it means instead of a refuse truck taking away a ton of waste, they would only take away 200 kilos of residue. So they only need to visit 20% of the time. And then that waste could be fed into the centralized container unit, which we call our IDR 5K. That's it for me, I think, because time is running out, but I'm welcome to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for your presentation and for showing us your company. So we have a few questions from the audience. What is the main cause of large food waste and how to control it? Is asking Muhammad.
Well, there's two types of food waste, really. There's avoidable and there's unavoidable. There's, if you like, the avoidable things of excess shopping, buying. We should only buy what we need to eat. And unavoidable, say, factory producers. Let's take an example, a potato crisp manufacturer. They will maybe clear out their fat once a week, oils, and also the crisp particles in the bottom of the oils, as well as the potato peel, as well as the crisps that are running down their production lines, which have black marks on. They don't want them in their packets. So that can be taken to the machine on their site and used to convert into energy, and also the heat maybe to help warm up the next batch of oil. and then the digestate, as I mentioned before, can then be taken away and given back to their potato growers to throw on their land.
Thank you for your answer. Damaso is asking, do you franchise or have representatives in other countries?
We don't have representatives in other countries at the moment. We are speaking with a few countries in Europe and America. We are fairly new, but we have a lot of interest worldwide. Yes, and it's something we will be looking at in the future.
Mm-hmm. Nicholas is asking, what is the capacity of this? How many of these would be needed to take care of all of London's food waste, for example?
Well, all of London's food waste. That's difficult to calculate. The problem with London, obviously, is space is at a premium. Somewhere like a wholesale market in London, it's prime because the disposal cost for their food waste is very high. You would need a number of the smaller systems to condense their food waste and so you're transporting more solid waste rather than 60-70% water to reduce their removal costs, and have a number of these where the space allows, really.
Okay. Is vermicomposting an effective method of dealing with food waste to prevent methane emissions at landfills?
No, composting is not the best because the compost pile itself is going to create methane. So the purpose of the IDR 5K is to remove the methane escaping into the atmosphere and turn it into a fuel, which we can burn to generate electricity. Mm-hmm. So that helps save the planet. As I mentioned with the EV garage, because landfill sites then eventually are covered over, but you see all these ventilation shafts protruding, allowing the methane just to escape into the atmosphere. Well, there's a better solution. There are other solutions now. And with governments trying to target zero food waste to landfill, a lot more local authorities are segregating food waste collections, which means they're getting the raw material in batches. And at a lot of waste depot sites, it would be an ideal place to site machines, rather than then take it to a local depot, throw it on the floor for a couple of days where it's already creating methane, then load it into a truck to then transport it somewhere else. So it's already lost an element of methane production by the time that process has been undertaken.
How are these units powered? Is asking Harriet.
Well, initially we can power them up with some biofuel that we would provide. But once the system is generating gas, an element of that gas is rerouted, and the power that it produces is rerouted to power our system. So it doesn't use any of the customer's power of their site. And we build that into the calculation of the amount of energy that particular company or business could generate from the system. So it's self-powering once it's up. And as long as it's fed properly and properly maintained, it has a 15 to 20 year life, and it's all manufactured in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Do you see hydrogen fitting into your business model in the future?
Absolutely. In fact, we already have our technical team working on a project at the moment, and we will be able to retrofit this once it is capable. But the point of adding hydrogen into the system will generate, we believe, 20 to 30% more methane, which means 20% more power output for the customer. So yes, definitely.
There's a question. Can biodegradable, compostable plastic be treated along with food waste?
No, is a quick answer. Well, biodegradable plastic, ideally not, because if we want to return the digestate to the land, then the government restrictions are pretty tight in terms of the amount of plastic per million parts you can have. So no, at the moment it's purely food, organic waste to go into the system.
Thank you. There is a question from Zara. Thank you for your presentation. Is the system for transforming food waste into renewable energy considered carbon negative?
Absolutely, because you take the carbon footprint of trucking it to a centralized anaerobic digestion. If you're generating the food waste on site and you're putting it straight into the system on site, and the machine is powering itself from an element of the power it's generated, yes, it's good. It's good CSR policy, adds to a company's CSR benefits.
Okay, there is a question from Ines. Could be a solution giving this food to the poor country that suffers from hunger, or minimizing the production quantity per year for specific production in food?
Well, the problem with giving food to other countries is the time it takes to transport it in a fresh, stable environment. And a lot of this is going to be food waste. So it's plate scrapings off a buffet, or as I mentioned about the food producer, it could be where they're harvesting crops. So say it's a pea crop and they're segregating the peas from the pods. Well, that is organic waste. So that has got energy and methane in it. It's not taking packaged food as such that we could ship anywhere else. That becomes avoidable food waste, if you like, in terms of if we bought less, or there was less choice in supermarkets, or we bought more local food waste. But then thinking about food per se, the world is so small, and you look in a supermarket where things like beans, peas, mangoes, pineapple, they come from around the world.
Thank you. So we have last two questions. Nikos is asking, can you feed it with used fried oil?
Yes, definitely. It's obviously better. It can be fed by numerous things, but the better the mix. So a bit of a mix with, say, potato peel or something, rather than just one specific item all the time, produces more gas and it makes the system more efficient.
Okay, and there is a question also about the price of a unit.
That's very difficult. There is no sort of standard price because it depends on the size of the system, but also it depends on the amount of food waste that business or waste area is generating and what they're looking to get out of it. So there's no specific price, but we aim to, I would say, maximum get a return of investment within 5 years. And in some cases, which we've already seen, it can be as little as 2 years.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for your very informative presentation. So now we will have around 15 minutes for additional questions and answers, which were not answered yet. So I would ask our speakers who are still with us, Henrik and Vidya, to turn on their cameras if they're here. Hi, great. And we can go through some additional questions as we received. So for example, for Henrik, we had some questions related to plastics. So there was a question, for example, related to bacteria, the new bacteria, which is actually decomposing the plastic. So what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, I see it as one of the techniques that we see popping up now. I see it as something that could be, for example, for all the waste that is already placed in open landfills. It could be interesting to look at bacteria, but I think for landfills, we should really look at how can we turn it into oil, and then we can extract the monomers and use the plastic again, for example, and take care of all the methane, of course, coming out of those landfills at the same time. But I don't see bacteria as a general solution. I see it more as a technofix. If you look at the amounts, 8 million tons of plastic ending up in the world's oceans every year, and doubling that already in 10 years. It's huge amount. So we have to look more general at our consumption and how we can get it into a more sustainable practice and build systems around products in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There was also a question for you. What are your thoughts on companies like Sequel, especially for the fashion industry? Do you think... you cannot hear me?
No voice.
You cannot hear me? Okay. Oh, okay, so perhaps there is some issue on your side.
I can hear you.
Okay, because I think other can hear me, right? So perhaps there is some issue on your side, Henrik. I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. Sorry, I couldn't hear you before. I couldn't hear the question.
Okay, sorry. So I will just repeat it.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on companies like Sequel, especially for the fashion industry? Do you think they provide a good solution?
What companies?
Sequel. They were asking about a specific company. I don't know if you know this one when it comes to fashion industry.
It's a fishing company?
No, it's a fashion company.
Fashion
so perhaps
company.
Yeah, so perhaps you are not aware of this one.
Yes, well, when it comes to fashion, we know that that fashion and that textiles is going to be one of the big issues in the future, and there is a huge overconsumption, especially of textiles, and it's mainly made out of plastic. So also there we have to look into how can we repair much more in the future. I mean, the youngsters around us, they reuse a lot of textiles now. It's become fashion to reuse any product or repair any product. So especially in the textile sector, there has been such a huge pace on producing more and more and to a lower price. And we need higher prices on quality products and lots more of reuse and repair in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We had also some questions related, for example, how to influence the government in some countries to do more steps when it comes to reusing the plastics, etc. So perhaps you could tell us your suggestions or your ideas.
Yeah, I mean, what we have been trying to do is to team up with some of the bigger corporates and to make some models. For example, I was showing the plastic cup from the festival. It's a small system, but it's still 2 million cups used in Danish music festivals every year. And the festival cup is carrying the story about reuse, so that all the youngsters on concerts, they were meeting this cup and they were meeting it again and again, the same cup. It was washed and they met the cup again. They brought it back to the bar and got a new drink. And that cup to us represents an example of how you can tell the story about reuse in a festival setting, which is a nice place to get some emotion and some understanding of what does a reuse system mean. In Denmark, we have already on bottles, we have a deposit, an award system that so that most bottles, in 94% of all bottles, and now also juice and yogurt containers, they are brought back to the stores. And we see that system copied in more general when it comes to takeaway sectors and other single-use material sectors, that you can copy that idea into other parts of our consumption patterns.
Mm-hmm, thank you. Luvoyo was asking, he's from South Africa, how can we enforce a culture of recycling at people's homes? Most of the time in the third world countries, we don't have recycling facilities, saying Luvoyo. So
Yes.
is there any suggestion?
Well, I think we see some green market models right now. I mean, for example, if you look into the loop system, a loop is bringing containers with the grain, with flour, with oil, rice into the bigger supermarket chains now. And during the pandemic, they have been able to grow their activities. So showing that you can actually control also in a pandemic reuse and disinfection of reused containers for rice or etc. And we should try to copy that at a bigger scale, but also on a small local scale. How can you introduce small systems where you bring back or you can maybe only pick up a coffee or a soup if you bring a cup, etc. So all these small changes and small ideas, they will grow into bigger market models in the coming years, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Then we can see also some questions for Vidya, as we had many about your technology. Just a second. So, for example, what we didn't answer, what is the approximate conversion ratio plastics to fuel in tons to liters, Vidya? I'm sorry, we cannot hear you. You have to unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. On an average, the conversion is for every ton of plastic, it's anywhere between 50 to 60% is the conversion. So you get 500 to 600 liters from every ton. But it also depends upon the quality of feedstock. So the higher the quality of feedstock and the more homogeneous the feedstock is, the chances of getting a higher yield is also good. So you can go anywhere from 65 to 70%, but we are a very conservative company. So, you can see over the internet, a lot of companies may advertise 80, 90%, but I don't think that is completely true. So unless you're working in very controlled environments and research labs like what they do in educational institutions where they put pure forms of polymer pellets into the machine, you rarely would get even 75 to 80%. So a conservative approach would be to say anywhere between 50 or 60%, and that would mainly depend upon the homogeneity of the feedstock and the quality of the feedstock. So if you're going to put only single-use plastic, then obviously your yield will be lower.
Okay, thank you for your answer. What is the amount of effluent gases after burning of the oil? Is it lower than the usual oil?
You're talking about the process or about the end product? The end product, definitely. See, the process, as I've already told you, is completely green. There are no effluents and there are no emissions because we capture it under the circular economy model. But having said that, when we talk about the oil usage, it is much lower than what would be from fossil fuels, but mainly because the sulfur element in our oil is almost zero.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would like to also ask our participants if you have any question now, or you would like to say something or ask also with your video, please use this opportunity. We can make it even more interactive. So you can raise your hand and you can even use your audio, or we can also turn on your video. So just to let you know that there is this possibility to share also your story or share some interesting question. So let's see. Additional questions. So there was for Vidya question. Although the topic was plastic and not CCS, we are a company that are currently researching on a new technology for BE CCS together with KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. However, CCS implementation is taking much longer than was forecasted several years ago. According to you, what is the main reason that CCS implementation isn't happening to the extent as anticipated? Is it due to heavy investment costs, operation costs, or has it to do with the difficulties with CO2 storage?
So the answer lies in almost all of what you've said, but the main reason I would attribute to it, this is a problem of behavioral economics, because the world is such that we always want something in return for our technology. So if you're going to implement solar technology, you get solar power, but the world is not very, it turns out that we are not really happy about just storage of carbon, carbon dioxide, which doesn't, in the long term, but merely talking about a 2-degree climate change or even 1.5 climate change is not enough reason for people to put money in or invest into these technologies. Of course, the technology, as I can see it, is proven, basically because the methods may be very many, but the whole idea is that the carbon dioxide that is derived sticks to certain types of material, like, for example, ammonia. So it is established. But the reason why it is not being implemented is basically, as I can see it, is a problem of behavior economics. We need to have a behavioral change, and we have to look at things not from the short term, but the long term impact of such technologies.
Thank you, Vidya. Also for Stephen, there was a comment with a question from Blick. I understand a lot of food damage which leads to food waste is during transportation. Have you tried to address that before addressing methane?
Well, we haven't, but we are working with, say, supermarkets and their logistic companies who deal with their waste. And yes, there is a lot damaged in transit, but that's up to the shippers. All we're trying to do is to make the most effective use of that waste and reduce the methane exposure to the planet, but at the same time, turn waste into a resource and expense into revenue for those particular companies who would use our systems. And then just to take up on the other point a little earlier about the frying oil, yes, that's very good. Something like cooking oils would produce, say, 600 cubic meters of gas. General food waste, say, 300 cubic meters, which is why it's very difficult to put a price on a system, because it's down to the individual company or their segregated waste, the elements within that waste, how much water and packaging is in there. Do they need a depackager? Do they need a shredder? If there's bones in there, etc. But yeah, shipping per se is always an issue, but this is trying to make ultimately use of the waste before it's just thrown onto landfill, which in the UK will be illegal in 2 years anyway.
Thank you very much, Sid, for the answer. So if there are not any additional questions, I would like to maybe ask you, dear presenters, if you would like to add something, or perhaps you could suggest for us globally, like what do you think we should do as individuals to help the current situation, what each of us can do to help our planet?
Should I go first?
Sure, please.
Yeah, so firstly, I think it should be a behavioral change from all our sides. You have to take into consideration the 4 R's, reduce our usage of plastic, reuse it, recycling it, try our best to segregate at our houses. I mean, charity begins at home. So these are small efforts that we should do from our houses. So I know countries in the developed countries like Europe, they have a very good system of segregation of plastic waste, whereas in our developing countries, waste is not segregated. And that is one of the main reasons that availability of feedstock becomes a problem. So as individuals, we can start by segregating our plastic waste and reusing plastic waste. So in India, I think reusing of plastic is pretty good. And that is the reason recycling itself, if you see the numbers in India, is up on, about 60%, which is highest in most countries. I mean, although it may not be a healthy option, but we do see our PET bottles being used for various reasons. Once the water is over, it is filled with juice, or it's filled with household cleaners. So we extend the life span of our plastic, which may not be perfect, but at least, it is less stress on virgin plastics, reuse in a different manner. The second thing I would say is, accepting it from the government and from the, the administrative side. I think to be accepting of newer technologies and to give newer technologies a chance. See, as we've already seen, there is enough plastic in this world for varied kind of technologies to work in tandem. They need not substitute each other, but they can complement each other. They can work together so that all technologies can, be applied in every country, and we can get more use out of these technologies and be able to mitigate more types of plastic waste. So, and of course, corporates, I think they need to change their ideology about the short term and look at building brands which has a connect with the environment and climate change. Therefore, building a brand that is conscious, not just about the end product that they manufacture, but looking through the overall, health of our planet. And therefore, they will be more brand conscious and more people will actually align with them.
Thank you very much, Vidya, for your opinion and for your suggestions. Yes, Henrik, please.
Yes, I think it all comes in waves. I mean, what we have seen with climate change and the whole issue of climate change it's been coming in waves. We have had more movements regarding climate change, and now the wave is becoming really strong because I think many of the youngsters are really getting engaged. And what we have seen in the last only 7 years with plastic change is also that we have been riding on a wave, and that plastic has been a kind of tool to explain overconsumption, to explain climate change. It's been the visualization, the mirror of how we act and how we fail. And I think the next part of this wave will really be to rethink. We have to reduce and reuse and recycle, but we also need to rethink and stop and ask ourselves, how can we not produce waste in the future? And that's really interesting. That's going to be the green business models of the world. And we see all the individual actions now ending up being actions made by multinational companies and governments. All the individuals that have asked for, can't I get a reusable solution, a reusable cup? Can't I get a bag that I can use again and again? All those individual questions for more sustainable solutions are adding up to this, the agenda around plastic pollution being an election issue and a part of the explanation of the climate change issue and our overconsumption. So I think that the green business models and all the waves, the small waves together, they will make an even bigger and greener wave in the future. It only started.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for your nice words. Stephen, would you like to add something?
Go on then, very briefly. Yes, I mean, that's very interesting. I think we are certainly, take the UK, segregating waste more, but there's still not the technological solutions to meet the demand to process that waste in this country. We are looking at food waste because that's a key methane generator, if you like. And you understand plastic takes a long time to degrade, etc. But I think we need local authorities, as Vidya said, to invest, to try new things, to try new technologies, the food waste per se, turn it from a waste to a resource, from an expense to a revenue. And corporates are getting on board with that idea and are very interested. And it's the same with eliminating plastic. I mean, the systems sound great. If they're small scale enough, they can be local, these pyrolysis systems, a bit like our compact AD. You bring it back to a local community. The local community are generating the waste, you're processing the waste, and they get the benefit, rather than, and I don't think we do it so much now, I think it's been halted, ship it around the world to somebody else's problem, because it is coming back to bite us all.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So I think our webinar is getting to its end, and I would like to thank to all the speakers for great presentations and great projects that they are doing and helping our planet. You are a huge inspiration for all of us. And I would like to thank, of course, to our participants here on Zoom, also YouTube participants. I hope it was interesting for you and you've learned something new. Please do not forget to follow us on our social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And you can give us also feedback on our LinkedIn event group. A recorded version of this webinar will be available on YouTube as well, and you will receive also the presentations from our speakers. Again, if your organization would like to make exciting webinar, you can contact us on operations@uwicwebinars.com and we can collaborate. Also, if you would be interested in sponsoring our free environmental webinars, just get in touch with us. Thank you very much. Stay tuned because other environmental webinars are coming and I believe that we will meet there again. Thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.